Imagine for a moment the walls of Rome, built to intimidate the world, are now in flames. Fire devours stones that once seemed eternal, and in the streets echoes the sound of barbarians, men clad in animal skins, wild eyes, and simple weapons, plundering the city that for centuries had been the center of civilization. Those same streets that once witnessed the triumphal processions of generals are now covered in bodies and ashes. The impossible has happened. Rome has fallen. How could the most powerful empire in history, master of invincible legions and feared military organization, collapse before peoples once considered primitive? The answer lies in a combination of arrogance, internal decay, and enemies who learn to turn Rome's weaknesses against her. Today, we will journey through this dark and fascinating story, revealing not only how the barbarians brought down Rome, but also why this event forever changed the course of humanity. Prepare yourself, because every detail of this narrative will surprise you, and in the end, you will realize that the fall of Rome is not just an ancient story. It is a mirror reflecting the dangers that still haunt our world. If this beginning has already gripped you and made you see Rome in a different light, I ask only one thing. Repay this effort right now by leaving your like and subscribing to the channel. That is what keeps this story alive and gives us the strength to keep bringing content most people will never show you. Click, join, and be part of this journey, because together we will uncover secrets that can change the way you understand the past and the present. At its height, Rome was not just a city. It was the heart of an empire stretching from the deserts of Africa to the ice of Britannia. Its roads connected worlds, its aqueducts carried water to the masses, its legions upheld order with relentless discipline. To many, Rome was indestructible, a fortress that could never fall. Its squares displayed treasures looted from conquered peoples. The Colosseum showed the power of a society that even turned death into spectacle. For centuries, it seemed impossible to imagine a future without Rome dominating the earth. But it was precisely in this setting of glory that the cruel irony was born. The higher the rise, the more devastating the fall. How could something so solid shatter before enemies considered inferior? The answer begins when we look beyond the shine of marble and see the internal cracks that, little by little, corroded the empire from within. The Romans called barbarians all peoples living beyond their borders, but that word carried more prejudice than truth. Goths, Vandals, Franks, Saxons, Huns, each tribe had its own culture, strong leaders, and warrior traditions that challenged Rome's definition of civilization. To the Romans, they were just savages without order, but in practice, many had already learned to negotiate, fight, and even coexist within the empire itself. Some served as mercenaries in the legions, others settled on Roman lands in exchange for peace. They were resilient warriors, accustomed to cold, hunger, and endless battles. They did not possess Rome's monumental cities, but they had something the Romans were beginning to lose: unity in the face of adversity and unshakable loyalty to their chiefs. Rome underestimated them, and that mistake would cost dearly. After all, how could it resist enemies who turned every defeat into a lesson, returning even stronger? Before the barbarians tore down Rome's gates, the empire was already destroying itself from within. Emperors were swapped like pieces on a chessboard, many assassinated by their own guards. Corruption rotted the Senate, legionary discipline collapsed, and soldiers sold their loyalty to the highest bidder. The luxury of the elites contrasted with the misery of the people, fueling revolts and eroding confidence in Rome's greatness. Meanwhile, the empire split in two, east and west, losing the power, strength of a unified core. Once abundant wealth could no longer sustain the weight of wars, and treasuries ran dry under crushing taxes. Rome, which once seemed eternal, now staggered toward ruin like a cracked marble colossus. And the barbarians watched, ready to strike at the perfect moment. On the horizon came a threat that seemed torn from the apocalypse: the Huns, swift horsemen, relentless archers, warriors who spread terror by reputation alone. At their head was Attila, called the Scourge of God, whose presence made kings tremble. But the impact of the Huns went far beyond direct battles with Rome. Their arrival drove other peoples, such as the Visigoths and Vandals, into Roman lands. It was like a giant wave. To escape the Huns, entire tribes poured into the empire, demanding land, food, and protection. Rome, weakened, could neither contain them nor negotiate effectively. Thus, Attila, though he never conquered Rome directly, was one of the greatest forces accelerating its collapse. The terror he sowed opened the gates for Rome's enemies to break through her walls. The year was 410 AD. When Alaric, leader of the Visigoths, marched through the gates of Rome, the world witnessed the impossible: the eternal city violated. For 3 days, its streets were consumed by flames, screams, and despair. The gold of temples, the treasures of noble houses, even sacred symbols were carried away. For Romans, who believed themselves under the gods' protection, this was more than a military defeat. It was a spiritual wound. The myth of invincibility collapsed before their eyes. For the first time in nearly 800 years, a foreign enemy marched inside the capital of the empire. Many believed it was the end of the world, but in truth, it was only the beginning of the collapse. Rome would survive a few more decades, but it was never the same after that sack. 45 years later, Rome suffered an even more devastating blow. In 455 AD, the Vandals, coming from North Africa under Gensric's command, invaded the already weakened capital. For 14 days, the city was systematically plundered. Temples, palaces, even relics were shipped to Carthage. This time, there was not only shock, but resignation. Rome had no strength to resist. The name Vandal became forever synonymous with destruction. If the sack of 410 shattered the myth of invincibility, the sack of 455 ripped away the last remnants of imperial dignity. Rome still existed, but it was only a shadow of itself, waiting for the final blow that would end its glorious history. In 476 AD, Rome's fate was sealed in almost symbolic fashion. On the throne sat Romulus Augustulus, a fragile teenager with little of an emperor about him. His very name was ironic: Romulus, like the city's founder, and Augustus, title of the first great emperor. But the boy was nothing more than a puppet in the hands of generals. Then Odoacer, leader of the Heruli, deposed him without major resistance. There was no epic battle, no heroic defense of the walls. The empire simply dissolved, unable to sustain itself. The Roman West had come to an end, and Rome's mantle passed to barbarian kingdoms that would now shape medieval Europe. A deposed boy became the symbol of an empire turned to ruins. Rome's fall was not caused only by barbarian spears. It was born from her own internal decay: corruption, power struggles, social inequality, and loss of collective purpose. External enemies merely exploited the breaches opened within. This is history's true lesson. No empire falls overnight. It rots slowly until an external strike finishes the process. Rome reminds us that wealth, armies, and glory are not enough when the foundation is corroded. The arrogance of believing itself eternal only hastened its ruin. And that lesson echoes today. Civilizations, companies, even individuals who ignore their own weaknesses may collapse at the height of their greatness. The ruin of Rome is not just a distant memory in history books. It is a warning etched in time. What toppled the world's greatest empire was not only powerful enemies but blindness to its own flaws. Today, Modern nations, giant corporations, even personal lives repeat the same mistakes: arrogance, internal division, moral corruption. Rome teaches us that nothing is eternal when the foundations of greatness are forgotten. When we look at the ruins, we do not see broken stones. We see the reflection of human choices that sealed the destiny of millions. And the question is inevitable. How many of today's empires march toward the same end without realizing it? The fall of Rome is more than history. It is a mirror, a warning, a prophecy. If this message has already stirred new reflections in you, I ask for something simple in return. Leave your like and subscribe to the channel. This gesture of gratitude helps us keep sharing stories that transform how we see the past and warn us of present dangers. Supporting this content is more than a click. It is joining a community that seeks to learn, grow, and be strengthened through every narrative. Repay now and allow more people to be transformed by this knowledge.